I'm currently the scientific director of Midgam. Midgam in Hebrew is, the word Midgam is samples, and the acronym is Israel National Biobank for Research. So it's a nice wording. This is how I see it. And I really want to talk, I heard what Alison said and Isabel said, and actually we have so much in common. And I think it's great that my presentation is not just talking about us and maybe more about how to pay attention and try to figure out how to make things work for us and others. So just a brief about what's going to be in the few minutes that I'm going to talk is I will following a short description about Midgam, our vision and mission. I will discuss the potential market and the barriers we face. I will share my view on the changing demands of our customers and study scopes of biobank samples. I'll touch base on a short SWOT analysis, and I'll mention issues relevant to IP that was not mentioned before. And I'll share some actions taken by us to deal with the challenges mentioned. So, few words about us. Midgam was established in 2014, and these are the people that contribute to the management of Midgam. Professor Weissner is the head of the management, myself as the scientific director, Dr. Adelina Ovcharenko is our QC manager and responsible for all ethical and regulatory affairs, and Edna Sabag is our administrative manager. Few words. We are a national infrastructure to promote research. Second, both in academia and industry. There was a joint financial support for our entity from 4 governmental entities. The Innovation Authority as part of the Ministry of Economics, that represents the industrial aspect, the Ministry of Science and Technology, the Ministry of Treasure, and there some money was received from the Committee for Higher Education. That's is responsible for the academic aspect of researches, studies that can be done with our samples. Our samples include tissues, tumor and normal, fresh frozen and paraffin embedded, blood separated for serum, plasma, and white blood cells, urine, and many others. We are a decentralized biobank. We have 5 hospitals and a management that the hospital spreads all around Israel, all over Israel. We provide researchers with a high quality of biosamples, as I just mentioned, some types of them, and of course, annotated data for conducting legally approved studies, all these samples for a fee. And we also became, this is part of the solutions or actions we've taken, but I wanted to say it here as well, we also became a one-stop shop. So you can approach us, find out the samples and data that you need. And unlike others, I heard today 2 places that don't require IRB approval for the usage of the samples that we have. We do. We have an IRB for the collection, the processing, and the storage of the samples. But whenever a researcher wants to use the samples, they need to have an approved protocol by the IRB that enables them to use the samples. They ask for a waiver of consent because we already did that for them. But this is something that I will mention along my talk later again. I mentioned the type of samples that we have, and I want to add to that lately, in the last year, we inherited actually a new collection of 14,000 DNA samples of different kinds of diseases, and these are ready for use as well. Okay, so in respect of the collecting centers, the operational thing that is happening there regarding the donor samples and annotated data is the recruitment, collection, processing, and storage of data. And regarding the management, we are responsible for the operational, scientific, computational, and regulatory aspects, and also for legal, marketing, budget, of course, that we're talking about here now, and collaborations. We have around 200,000 biosamples from about 20,000 donors. Most samples are oncological, around 60%. We have an increasing demand of requests for samples, and we serve dozens of ongoing researchers. And we actually, lately or in the last 2 years, started to deliver samples worldwide, which is not very simple in Israel. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so our something happened here. Okay, our vision is, as I just said, Midgam, the Israeli National Biobank for Research, as a national infrastructure for the promotion of personalized medicine for the health and welfare of Israel's residents, will provide an added value and growth engine for the high-tech industry, research institutions, and healthcare organizations in Israel. This is the vision that we started with, and I will add not only in Israel, but also globally, because I always say that it says on my forehead, on our forehead as an infrastructure, that we want to promote research in order to do all these things that are written here in the vision. Regarding the mission, I think, as I just said, we want to improve patient care options by providing researchers with various samples, including designated collections for specific research protocols where distinctive samples are needed. Okay. So let's start business. What are the challenges that we encounter, and what barriers we need to make sure that we manage? So I can say that the worldwide market for research biosamples is estimated at around $40 billion per year, according to a report that we've read that was published in 2020. I guess it's more now, but it's enough. There is a great potential to the biosamples or data or data market, and we are paying a close attention to the needs of the potential customers, but we still encounter many hurdles that make it difficult to massively use the samples and data collected in Israel. Among these are pharma industries. The large international pharma companies rarely conduct basic research in Israel. There is a very small market, maybe not very, but there is a small market in Israel, a local market. And according to a market survey we conducted in 2018, 87% of biosamples users for research, of course, in Israel considered as small users who purchased up to 25 biosamples in the small amount of around $1,500 per year. So we must find ways to enlarge the scope of uses. There is the regulatory issues that I said I will discuss. So these issues include mostly the fact that Israeli regulation does not distinguish between research with human biosamples and clinical trials in humans. As a result, transferring samples from Midgam to basic studies and to researchers abroad is very challenging. And competition-wise, well, significant biobanks exist in HMOs. HMOs are health medical organizations. I think it's kind of unique to Israel. But also, biobanks exist in some larger hospitals that are not part of Midgam. As I said, only 5 hospitals are part of Midgam, and we have many more hospitals in Israel that have their local or their own biobanks. These are disease-oriented biobank. Others are population-based biobanks. Those that are in the HMOs don't have tissues. Those in the hospitals have collections that are made for internal needs and are not available for researchers around Israel, but only or mostly for their own use. The second thing is that the agreements between Ministry of Health and Midgam's hospitals are based on the principle of providing partial funding. That means the money that was available for the establishment of Midgam as a national entity is given to the hospitals that are part of Midgam for the use of it doesn't support it, the whole thing. It's a partial funding. And I'm not sure that you have noticed, but the 4 governmental entities that support Midgam, none of them is the Ministry of Health, but we are under the Ministry of Health. And the agreement that was done between the hospitals and the Ministry of Health is that the money goes through the Ministry of Health, but they didn't pay even $1. Anyway, so because the agreements are partial funding, this method encourages independent internal activity, which creates a competition. And the last thing I want to say here is the utilization potential, which Alison said something about that, and this is very important. Specifically in Israel, whatever Alison said is true. There is underutilization, and I will discuss it later, but we believe that Israel does not take advantage of the great potential inherited in our public health system. Our data is digitalized for many decades, and the other thing that we don't take advantage in is that we are considered to be a unique population, very variable. It is necessary for biobanks and biobankers to pay attention, as I just said before, and to be agile in thinking of solutions and actions in order to adapt to the constant changes in the researchers' needs. So if we try to define the recent and most important changes that characterize the market, I would say that there are 3 layers. First is the type of products, the changes in type of products needed for research. There is a shift from fresh frozen that we were collecting since 2014 to fresh viable. And the need for follow-up data is increasing. The need for controls from healthy donors is becoming huge. And as the technology is progressing, paraffin embedded tissues become more and more attractive. Data is becoming a main asset with genetic data and genomic data information, and not only information, but also the analysis with longitudinal data for donors on top of the regular clinical data characteristic of biobanks, and also the accumulation of personal data and patient-related outcome. This leads us to the third layer, the new era of usage. We are now talking about long-term studies rather than single use at a single time point. The usage of fresh, viable specimens to create primary cultures, 3D structures, stem cells, liquid biopsies, all of these are new demands or needs of the customers that we need to apply. Robert, is it possible to make the poll now?
Yes, I will set that up 1 second.
Okay, so I forgot to tell you when it is.
No, it's okay. I just when I saw that line, I remembered. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I have a poll for you, and the question is: what do you think should biobanks invest resources, time, money, manpower in producing 3D structures such as organoids or spheroids from the collected specimens, or do you think biobanks? Wow, there's a noise here. Okay, or do you think that biobanks should deliver fresh viable specimens to the researchers so they can use it with their own protocols? Robert, how do we see the answers?
Well, I can see them. I can tell you what the screen is saying. I don't know if everybody else can see them, but
I can't. But just
strange.
Tell us.
Okay, well, it's results still coming through, but
okay, so we'll wait for a second.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there is no right or wrong answers. Just interesting.
Okay, well, we don't have very many responses. We don't have a very big audience, but it looks like 29% say that Biobank should invest resources in producing 3D structures, whereas 71% say they should deliver fresh, viable specimens.
I like the audience. This is my thought as well. I will tell you my thoughts about it. I think that we can never know what a specific researcher will need. So I believe that our job is to maintain the most common thing or most baseline thing that a researcher will need, so we can take it to we can give it for them to do whatever they need, like the downstream application can be whatever. So if we make organoids and keep it, then they won't be able to make spheroids or do I don't know, something else. And if we do tissue culture, so we don't know which goodies we need to put in the medium for everyone else to use. So thank you, audience. I like your reply. Okay. A short SWOT analysis for Midgam that will lead us to discuss the IP and finally the actions that we have taken to deal with the challenges. Now I see the poll. Okay, thank you. Okay, so strength. Midgam is a disease-oriented biobank that is located in medical centers, so this is a strength. We are available to all researchers. This is our policy. It's part of our policies. At your service, prospective collections. We are flexible and we fit the collected samples to a study. That means that we don't collect everything. We collect what is needed. We did collect everything at the beginning, but we decided that we don't have enough room, enough place to keep all samples. So we minimized what we collect, just to keep the potential samples in the freezers, but we do collect what we think and what customers are asking us to collect. We have broadened ICF informed consent form that includes a commercial use, and it has an approval to collect and preserve and store any type of biosamples for any future use, including, as I said before, genetic, genomic, whatever. One-stop shop, as I said before, our IRB is included, and we don't ask for intellectual property. This is also a policy. Weaknesses. Samples are stored in the different hospitals and not in a centralized biobank, which defines an integrated competition, both of samples and customers. The access to data include not only clinical data, as we're working in a coded environment as opposed to the hospitals. The samples are being collected at the hospitals, and the Midgam team in the hospital know that the samples are identified, but when we get the information to the management, it is coded, and we don't have names and IDs. We just have numbers. So the access to data, as I said, is lacking. We don't have enough information. We don't have access to the electronic medical records. We don't get imaging data, and we have to ask for the follow-up data. If we're talking about oncological patients and we want to know what drugs or treatments the patients received and how they responded, we need to go back to the teams in the hospitals and ask specifically for certain information. And there's also the issue of return of results. According to our current informed consent form, there is no option of returning results to the donors. And I know this is a nice issue to discuss, and there are many things that can be said about that. If you want, we can talk about it later on the panel. Regarding opportunities, we believe that the current structure of Midgam enables us to create a research environment that attracts excellent studies in new fields. And by new fields, I mean rare diseases, liquid biopsies, which is now a hot topic. The third structures, as I just said before, stem cells in academia and industry in Israel and globally. And the other point is the sequencing data and bioinformatic. Much of the clinical pathological data, sorry, I missed that. I wanted to say something about the IT system, so I'll go to that. We are having problems as everyone else in the LIMS and IT system information, and now the big data studies that need much more data with a sample, without a sample. So much of the information is documented as free text. I think it's a common problem, and the thing is that if you want to engage free text issues, it's not that simple, especially if you need to deal with it in English and in Hebrew together, because English is left to right and Hebrew is right to left. And we are now trying to perform to solve this issue. We're doing an NLP study, the natural language processing, to enable us to extract the information from these free text issues. And now regarding the sequencing data and bioinformatics, I wanted to say that we are willing to invest a lot of money in order to enrich the data that we have and to build a data lake that will enable advanced research. So these are the opportunities that we see in the current structure of Midgam. And threats, I'll mention briefly the main threats we are dealing with, which are budget shortage, and that will be forever, the regulation burden that we have, and the fact that we have a small market and we need to find out ways to deal with that. So few words about intellectual property. Okay. So the main points I want to raise regarding that issue are actually, what is the product? Biosamples and data are available to the researchers for a limited use and a limited time, according to their IRB approval. As I said, they need to have a specific approval for their research. So they define a time and specific use, and they can do, and they get the product from us. And although the researchers, this is the ownership thing, and although the researchers do not own the biosamples that they got from us or the data, still the research products and knowledge are theirs. So they own it, and we as a policy decided not to be part of that, and I'll explain a little bit further. Although IP royalties may generate income in the long term, public fundings for biobanks prevent the option for copyrights or royalties. The aim is to encourage research without harming industrial research and development, while remembering that our mission is to improve patient care options by providing researchers with high quality samples and with minimal headache. So this is our policy as well. And that leads to the high expenses prior to IP realization, because to receive IP, we will require close follow-up to each researcher. We will need legal advice and a way to associate the final product to a particular biosample or data that was derived from Midgam. So, as I said, we'll need much more expenses prior to realizing anything from the IP. And lastly, I will share actions we at Midgam are taking in order to deal with underutilization, budget shortage, and customers' research-oriented satisfaction. So regarding underutilization, the shift from, something is wrong here. The shift from fresh viable tissues makes our biobank empty as we collect and deliver on the same day. So as Robert just said before, a good biobank is an empty biobank. Looking for retrospective oriented studies that can use existing samples by offering grants. This is ongoing. It's a process in process. Another way to deal with underutilization is to do some PR on our population variety and samples that we already have. Actions that we are taking in order to deal with the budget shortage are, first of all, raising fees. And it was very impressive, Isabel, that you have 60% of your income coming from selling the samples. Sorry, selling the services. We're not allowed to sell samples. So we also raise fees, but we also have differential price list for industry and academia. Academia gets 50% off. We have different price lists for local customers, for local researchers, and globally researchers. In fact, all members of Midgam, hospitals-wise, must use our price list. We collect samples upon request rather than collecting everything. This is one change that we have made. We are being active at few evolving initiatives for new thinking, new technologies, and collaborations between researchers in industry and academia. We're finding creative ways to enable transferring samples from Israel to researchers abroad. For example, by applying for the IRB, if you are researchers outside of Israel, we are your PI, your principal investigator. So this is something that we are doing in the last 1.5, 2 years, something like that. Okay, the other issue that we are dealing, we found actions to tackle this thing and to make customers happy. So, as I said, we collect prospectively collections based on routine surveys we are performing routinely. Eventually, we have reasonable fees. We've seen that when researchers are applying to us and outside of Israel, and they say, okay, nice, this is okay. And very attractive is the no IP policy that we have. And lastly, the IRB, although it's for a fee, the industrial customers that we have are very happy to pay the fee because it's a service that is making their life much easier. And also it helps them work with one entity, Midgam, and not and still get samples from many centers. So this is a win-win option. And I want to thank you for your attention. These are my details, and you can contact me by email, looking at the website. If you want to call me, you can do that as well. And that's that. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Yehudit. That was most interesting. Your survey, I think I would react in the same way. You know, that the pressures on biobanks are just growing, aren't they? And the number of things that biobanks need to do now seem to be, so much more than they used to be 10 plus years ago when I was a biobank manager. For example, prospective collections to order. I mean, that must absorb huge resources. So you really don't want to be taking on any extra tasks that you don't have to.
I think it's more than taking extra tasks. I think it's not right for the study. If I, for example, extract DNA and you do it in a different kit in a different way, it's comparing apples and oranges, and then it's a problem. So
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And it was interesting to see that you have different prices for industry and academia. And am I right? It's for academia, it's 50%.
Academia pay less because we want to encourage them to do more basic research. And, you know, industrial companies can pay. It's okay.
Okay. And most of the companies that come to you are based in Israel.
Yes. And as I said, it's a very small market. So it's nice. We deliver many samples, really many samples, but still it does not cost recover expenses.